All right, so good morning to you on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, other video platforms. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Palo Window in Dora, Georgia. We're trying something new where we're trying to welcome in our folks on the other video platforms after we do our first and 15 at DawgNation.com and the DawgNation app. So after greeting them, let me finish the point that I was making to one of our commenters a moment ago. And if you ever want to join us for live commentary before the show begins, just simply go to DawgNation.com. Boom, right there at the top of the page. You can't miss it. My fat face kind of all over the place. Or you can watch in the DawgNation app there as well. We'll take your comments for 15 minutes, and then you can just roll on and watch the rest of the show with us there at DawgNation.com there too. We sometimes talk about our video interfaces and which platforms seem to function very well. I tell you, I think the platform there at DawgNation.com functions about as well as anything does. So I love to see the thousands and thousands of you per day who tune in there at DawgNation.com. That's always a great thing to be able to see. But the point is that we're talking about Georgia, Florida. My belief is, if it's one man, one vote, I'd love to see the cocktail party preserved because I think it's fun. But you get the sense there's a growing sentiment that they'd like to see it changed. And it's kind of hard to tell, is it high-dollar donors that like the game in Jacksonville? Is it Kirby Smart and those that want Smart to have what he wants that's on the side of going home and home, obviously for the benefit of UGA recruiting, as Smart has said many times. Smart kind of reiterated on Saturday that the announcement late last week that some recruits would be invited to attend the game doesn't really change his overall opinion about the game because that in itself is not a particularly effective mechanism for recruiting. Just leaving some tickets at the will call booth, that's not exactly the same thing as hosting recruits in kind of the way in which you would be able to do that even on an unofficial visit in Athens where they're getting a lot of contact with coaches. So to sum all this up, if it's a vote, I'm voting for Jacksonville. I'm voting to keep the cocktail party. But if the majority of Georgia fans felt differently, I'd sort of be in favor of them getting what they want, especially from the standpoint of, for a lot of Georgia fans, they just want a little bit more value into that season ticket. They only travel to home games. They want better home games, and clearly playing Florida every other year at home would certainly be an example of that. Tennille says she has the biggest problem, and this is once again one of our DawgNation.com commenters, with the Facebook video platform. Well, first of all, Tennille has her own problems with Facebook as it is, my understanding is. But beyond that, and I'm just messing with you, Tennille, but beyond that, there's no doubt that Facebook's the worst video platform. And I don't mean that. The Facebook commenters are great. A lot of you spend a lot of time on Facebook, and I want you to be on a platform that you're familiar and comfortable with. That's one of the reasons why we make the show available on as many platforms as we do. But Facebook is not a primary video platform the way that our hosting service at DawgNation.com is, or YouTube certainly is. That these platforms that are a little bit more video oriented, they do just kind of function a little bit better. I don't deny that. So I'd say you're free to watch the show or listen to the show wherever you want to. We try to make it available as many places as we can. But on our end, on the back end, sort of the back, part of the house here, there's no denying that certain platforms do just function better than others do. There's no denying that. All right, let us see what else. Matt Goodwin asked a good question. He says, how can you not support the coach as far as it goes? And he says the Florida-Georgia game. I'm going to flip it around and say the Georgia-Florida game. How can you not support the coach on that? I think that's a fair question. And for some people, they will say if Kirby Smart wants it, that's enough for me. I don't know. I mean, I think there's probably more. That's probably a more complicated question than I have time to answer here right now. But I certainly understand that for a lot of Georgia fans, all they need to know is that Kirby Smart wants to move the game, and so therefore they're willing to give him what he wants. I would say it's a lot of tradition. I would say that it's a lot of fun for a lot of UGA fans, and it doesn't seem like Georgia recruiting's been hurt too bad by not having the game in Athens every other year right now. So I can certainly understand your sentiment to say, hey, if Kirby wants in Athens, that's all I need to know. Line up and give him what he wants there on that. And so there you go. Miriam Corbin, thank you for the kind words. She says, I don't know how to survive the offseason without you. Well, that's awesome to hear. We love this Georgia football conversation, and we do it every single day in the offseason, everything else in between, have for a long time, and we're really proud of all that. So, Miriam, that's incredibly nice of you to be able to say. Richard D says, how about a home and away and along with a neutral rotation for the cocktail party? Some people have suggested that, and maybe that could work. For some reason, I've always kind of wondered if that really would be able to work. But some folks have maybe suggested that. Richard, the other thing I'll say is I know you reached out the other day about the waiting list for speaking of neutral site games, the DawgNation Duck Hunt tailgate. I'm going to try to find out some information about when some of those folks on that waiting list might find out their status on that. So let me see if we can get you some more info on that because I know you asked about that the other day. Our buddy William Perry, and listen, I like the cocktail party. William Perry loves the cocktail party. He has been a great advocate for that, and I always enjoy seeing him weigh in on all of that because he's always had some great stuff, including the tremendous Jack Davis artist rendition that he made, kind of making fun of our buddy Mike for Mike's. I'll never understand what this means quite so much to Mike, but nonetheless, Mike very anti-cocktail party for the most part, and William's had some fun with that in the past, including having a cool T-shirt made up for that. We've given William a couple golden shoes related to that, and that's a great thing to be able to see. All right, we have got to get started because we started on time. I'm going to make sure we keep the train on the tracks here, too. It's Jon Stinchcomb coming up. Jon will react to some of what we're learning right now about the Dogs as they prepare for the upcoming season. I'll tell you some of what I saw, for me, a rare experience to be in Athens and see some of those Georgia practice moments. That was unusual for me, but I was there on Saturday. I'll tell you what I saw there from that. Off the top, one of my big unanswered questions is starting to kind of take shape here a little bit. I think that's worth spending a few minutes on. We'll do that. I had a chance to ask Kirby a question directly on Saturday that's been of interest to me. Kirby gave a pretty direct answer right back, so we'll clear all of that up over the course of our time together. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
We think about Kirby Smart a lot, and there's a word I think that maybe sometimes you don't fully associate with Smart, but you heard like 3 different times while talking about the same player the other day. And so after the first scrimmage this past Saturday, this feels like a pretty good place to begin our show here today, DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. The other reason why I want to start this way for our show here today is because I think it sort of starts to stand up as a little bit of a formation to an answer to a question that I admitted last week that I wasn't quite sure of. Like, one of the things you've heard me say recently here is that for a Georgia rushing attack this season that A, I think has a chance to be better than it was last year, B, might actually need to be better than it was a year ago for Georgia to fulfill all of its season-long goals. I said before, I'm not quite so sure what's best for UGA. Is it the version of Georgia we saw in, like, say, 2017, 2018, when you had tandems of running backs, 2 different guys getting more than 150 carries, both those guys going over big totals, and that led the way to a lot of rushing success for UGA? Is that better? Or is something like we've seen the last couple of years, where it's been a little bit more of an ensemble cast? Now, last year, Zamir and James Cook ended up getting a lot of carries between the two of them themselves, but slightly more ensemble even last year than it had been in some of the previous years under Kirby Smart. Like, which formation for the Georgia running back room kind of makes the most sense for UGA here this year? Well, I think over the course of the last week, we're starting to get some of those questions answered just a little bit. And as I mentioned briefly a moment ago, a lot of praise coming from one of those running backs in particular. I want to talk about Kenny McIntosh. And I want to be really careful here because my purpose in all of this is not to do what maybe I probably do from time to time, because I do kind of like doing this. I'm not trying to be a carnival barker here. I'm not trying to grab onto a phrase and sort of oversell this. I am simply speaking as someone who is both a fan of UGA, a guy who hosts a show about Georgia, a guy who's just sort of genuinely curious about the team and trying to figure out, hey, who am I most interested in seeing for this upcoming season? And based on some of the stuff that Smart said on Saturday, based on some of the stuff that Georgia running backs coach Dell McGee said last week, I think on the list of players that I am most excited about seeing for the upcoming season, I think you've got to put Kenny McIntosh pretty squarely on that list, on your shortest of short list of guys that have a chance to be really entertaining to watch this fall. Smart was asked directly about a moment for McIntosh during the scrimmage, and Smart didn't hold back on using the word great. That's not a word we often hear Smart use. He's slow to say things like that, but didn't hesitate to say that in a specific context about McIntosh from Saturday. This is a fun way to start our show today. This is Kirby from Saturday on McIntosh.
He had a great run, but, to be honest, it was great blocking, too. Kenny's had a great camp. He's picked up pressures, played really physical, caught the ball out of the backfield. Everything that he wants to do at the next level in our offense, we ask him to do, and he's done a good job of that. I think Kenny would be the first to tell you he's got to really work hard to maintain his weight, take really good care of his body. I think Coach McGee's doing a great job of taking care of Kenny, and he's done a good job.
So listen, you hear Kirby Smart saying those kinds of things. Now, he's always got to throw in like the addendum to the sentence, right? The caveat is that conjunction. He's always sort of got to add that to it of like he's got to take care of his weight, and he's got to do this, he's got to do that. It's like Smart's never going to allow himself to go too far with a compliment before he kind of turns it into a coaching point, and we just sort of know that about Kirby, and most of us, I think, kind of like that about Kirby. But when you hear him saying he had a great run, it was great blocking, he's had a great camp, and all the thing that he's doing, and all the list of things that are that Smart views worthy of compliment, if that doesn't get you more excited about watching McIntosh this fall, I simply don't know what to tell you. That's a pretty interesting statement to hear from Smart, that as a Georgia running back room kind of feels its way around the dark here trying to decide what is the pecking order going to be, how many of these guys can we really lean on here this season. If you're Georgia, how many of those guys can you give a substantial number of carries to? Well, it sounds like right now McIntosh, this camp has been a little bit of a tone setter. That's a pretty complimentary statement there from Smart. And what's interesting is it also kind of ties into something that McIntosh's running backs coach, Dell McGee, his position coach, said when he spoke to the media there last week. More praise here from McIntosh, who kind of stands out as maybe one of the more intriguing figures for the Dogs thus far in the late summer. Here's McGee on the same topic.
He can do everything. He can run inside the tackles. He can run outside the tackles. He's really good on the perimeter. Has really, really good hands. Probably some of the best hands since DeAndre. He's good at running routes. He's a physical blitz pickup on third down, so he's definitely a complete back. And he's learned a lot from James and Zamir, and it's also a good example of, just like James and Zamir was, of just staying the course, not being too anxious to enter the NFL or enter the transfer portal, just being patient. And, hopefully all his hard work and his patience are going to pay off this year. I think the sky's the limit for him, and he's definitely going to be an integral part of our offense, and he'll be relied upon heavily.
Don't you love the idea of McIntosh being a complete back? That's the phrase that McGee uses there. The kind of guy that doesn't tip the offense's hand when he's on the field. Hey, it could be a between the tackles run. It could be a reception. Kirby talked earlier this summer about how they want to grow NFL running backs around here, and that means making guys capable pass catchers, something that James Cook definitely did, and that's one of the reasons why the Buffalo Bills made him a second-round pick, and it's one of the reasons why Cook's earned a little bit of buzz up there in Western New York with the way that he's kind of started his training camp there too, because he kind of knows how to do that, and McIntosh kind of cut from some of the same cloth, but not just a receiving threat out of the backfield, also a true runner there too, both McGee and Smart kind of talking about that. But the purpose of all this is not to say this is going to be Kenny McIntosh's team. They're going to feed him over and over again, a la DeAndre Swift in 2019. That's not what I'm necessarily saying here. What I'm saying here is that McIntosh may have stepped to the forefront right now as helping set the tone for the running back room, but you get the sense there are other guys who are part of this too. Now, we know that Kendall Milton was banged up and did not participate in the scrimmage on Saturday. Smart talked a little bit about that. You'll hear that more in a moment. But you also are kind of hearing some more of this chatter as it relates to Daijun Edwards. And some of the things specifically being said about Edwards I find to be pretty interesting. So I've asked, is this an ensemble situation or is this a tandem of backs like it's been before? Is this sort of one guy getting the majority of the carries? Well, in the case of Daijun Edwards, for a couple of reasons, it sort of seems like right now he's not going to be denied. And if Smart is saying really good things about McIntosh right now, and he is, he's also pretty complimentary of Daijun Edwards a bit there as well. Once again, Smart from Saturday, both on the rise of Edwards kind of out of the role of just sort of late game player and the current health situation of Kendall Milton, two of those backs who kind of exist around Kenny McIntosh right now, more from Kirby.
Daijun's had a really good camp. This guy's playing hard, playing physical, knows his assignments inside and out. He's picking up pressures. He's catching the ball in the backfield. So, to me, I've been really pleased with what he's been able to do. Kendall has too, but just the last couple of days, we've held him with the hamstring.
Yeah, so listen, on the part of the Milton thing here for a moment, no one denies that talent there, and Georgia fans, I think, are really eager to see more of Kendall this year in a situation where this gets a chance to be more of a showcase opportunity for him this season than it may have been when you had James Cook and Zamir White on the same team the last couple of years. So it's simply a matter of, hey, shaking off this little bit of a hamstring thing, and I know there have been a handful of like sort of dings and tweaks here and there that have kind of kept Milton from being on the field. So you get the impression that if he can move past this hamstring thing and if he can be back fully healthy again, then he's going to be very much a part of this conversation. Smart kind of suggested that there. But with the guys who are currently healthy, once again, I take it to mean something that Smart, fresh off having said, oh, Kenny McIntosh had a great camp. Dajon Edwards has also had a very good camp. Once again, kind of knowing how slow Smart is to just sort of throw praise around unless it's truly deserved. And in the case of McIntosh for sure and Edwards there as well, it seems like it is. And maybe for a guy like Dell McGee, who these are his guys in his position room, he may be a little bit more willing to throw compliments their way than Smart might be, just kind of knowing the personalities of the two guys. But once again, it's the specific nature of the praise that they're getting that I think speaks well to what the Georgia running back room might be here this year. In the case of McIntosh, one of the things you hear a lot, in fact, you heard this yourself, was, oh, there's patience here. A lot of guys who maybe would have left and looked to go transfer portal or tune out and think about their next spot because they're not getting a ton of carries. Well, in the case of Kenny McIntosh, he sort of waited his turn, and now he's ready for that opportunity. And once again, some of that same sort of selfless attitude, and we've all seen this ourselves. Dajon Edwards, when he's played late in games, has given you hard yards. This is a guy that has been kind of a human victory cigar, coming in when Georgia's up big and getting you easily out of the game and on to the next week. Well, it's right. Now you get the sense it's time for more of that. That's what that's what Edwards may have done in previous years, but that's not what he wants to do this year, nor is what this coaching staff wants him to do there as well. Kirby kind of alluded to that. Dell McGee again from last week on exactly what they're seeing from Dajon Edwards now that he's waited for his moment to have an opportunity for a much larger role here for the Dogs. Dell McGee again.
He's really quiet. He's not going to be a boastful guy. He doesn't talk a whole lot. But what you're going to get is what you see on Saturdays that you've seen. He's very unselfish. He closed out a lot of games. He wasn't a guy that was pouting because he didn't get in earlier in the game. He adds value and has a role on special teams, and that's a very, very important component of our success on the football field. He's going to be a competitor, and he's having a great camp thus far, and he had a great spring too. So expecting great things out of Dajon, and he's graduated into a role where he's going to get snaps.
I love that at the end. He has graduated into a role where he's going to get snaps. This isn't the human victory cigar anymore. This isn't, fourth quarter, 12 carries, get you out of there and move you on to next week. This is a guy who's going to be a much more focal point of the game plan earlier in the game. At least if you listen to Dell McGee closely, that's kind of what you get. Now, understand my point here. I'm not saying that this is going to be the Dajon Edwards, Kenny McIntosh show at running back for Georgia this season. That's not what I'm trying to tell you. I think that there are some interesting things being said right now about the two incoming freshman running backs, Branson Robinson and Andrew Paul. In fact, it's interesting enough that I'm actually going to save that conversation for like later on this week and sort of focus more on those guys in particular. And I do truly believe that Kendall Milton's also a very big part of all this too when he is healthy, and you certainly hope that's the case for him sooner rather than later. Based on the way that Smart described that hamstring injury, you're left to believe it could be, and it probably will be sooner rather than later. It doesn't seem like it's all that serious. In fact, I know Chris Milton, his father, tweeted, and then I guess maybe deleted, but originally tweeted that it wasn't a serious injury that he's dealing with. So you're left to believe that pretty soon here, Kendall's going to be back fully healthy again, and he's a big part of all this too. So it's not me saying, hey, McIntosh and Edwards, that's going to be your two-headed monster running back. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying, though, is this. Is that we have wondered what running back would look like, feel like for the Dogs here this season. Thus far this summer, it certainly seems like Edwards and McIntosh are doing a good job for setting the tone for UGA. There's seemingly a hungry spirit here. Edwards wants more carries. McIntosh, who we've seen obviously in a pretty big role for Georgia, he's ready for even more as well. And they get a chance to help kind of redefine this position in the aftermath of Zamir White and James Cook both moving on to the NFL. We potentially may hear from a lot of Georgia running backs here this season. That could happen because of the luxury of it or because of the necessity of it if somebody gets hurt. But no matter how that plays out then, Nice to hear Kenny McIntosh having good things being said about him. Nice to hear Dajon Edwards having good things being said about him. The specific kind of praise, the way they're working, the selfless attitude that they're devoting to this. I think that could speak good things for the Dogs here later on this fall. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We are presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and we're glad to have you with us no matter how you get to us today. Live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, or on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. We are available as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just happy to have you with us. And a big thanks to our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia for making it all possible. You know, they equip your house with energy-efficient windows and doors. That's such a valuable thing. That matters so much when it comes to this time of year, you know, bugs and stuff like that. You don't want that, you know, what's supposed to be outside getting on the inside, hot weather there too. And what's supposed to be inside, you want it to stay on the inside. You don't want it creeping outside with poorly fitted windows and doors, or just, you know, windows and doors that are of a lower quality. That's why you want to trust Pella Windows and Doors. Been recognized as really the market leader here in the Atlanta area for a long time. Survey after survey has indicated that's true. Savvy home buyers and homeowners know the Pella product, and they know what that does to increase the curb appeal and potentially even the resale value of their home. That's what Pella Window and Door Georgia is all about. Also, for the rest of this week, you can take advantage of great savings there, too. You can get $200 off windows, $400 off doors, or payments as low as $99 a month. You have between now and August 18th to take advantage of that great opportunity. That's a few more days there on that. So make sure you check them out. The Experience Center is open in Duluth. That's Monday through Friday from 9 to 5, 10 to 4 on Saturdays. You can check that out there, or you can find them online, pellaofga.com/DawgNation. That's pellaofga.com/DawgNation. You can also give them a call, 678-638-1496. That's 678-638-1496. Pella Expert can walk you through the entire process, let you know about your installation options. It's a no-pressure situation. They just want to educate you on what makes Pella Window and Door of Georgia viewed to be the best. You can do that with all of them today. All right, we're going to get Jon Stinchcomb here coming up in a moment. Before that, though, let's go around the doghouse, assisted today by AAA, and I had a rare experience for me on Saturday. I was both in attendance for the brief window that the media got to view on Saturday, and I was also able to attend the Kirby Smart press conference later on that afternoon. I'll get to the press conference, my interaction with Kirby there. We'll do that before we're done on the program. But let me kind of tell you, like, what I did for the practice observation period on Saturday. I've told our video audiences before that when it comes to like one of these short windows, it's very easy to get caught doing nothing. You either got to focus on one thing or like a lot of little things, and I just chose to sort of spend my entire time. I wanted to focus in on the wide receiver position. And some of this for me is in the aftermath of the Arian Smith injury. Obviously, that's another guy that, boy, it seems like injuries have been kind of a part of his story for a while here at UGA, and you'd love nothing more for that not to be true, but it sounds like, you know, surgery on this ankle. It sounds like he's going to be dealing with that for a few weeks here, whether it ends up being the entirety season or the majority of the season or part of the season, one way or another. Smith's going to be kind of on the shelf for the Dogs here for a little bit. So I was kind of left to wonder, you know, what is it that is going on for Georgia at wide receiver? I had a little bit of a theory, kind of a crackpot theory kind of emerging in my mind, and I wanted to sort of see if what I saw on the practice field kind of gave voice to some of that. And so the drill that you see is, and this is actually probably also one of the most fun things to watch when you're just sort of in that sort of brief period of time that the media gets a chance to see practice. You see quarterbacks working with pass catchers. You got the wide receivers there, but they also kind of work the tight ends into that, you know, position room too, or that drill work too. It's a little bit of a play polish type drill, I guess you might call it. Just, you know, quarterbacks throwing to the receivers running their routes. And, you know, it's one of those things where I feel like I know what Georgia has at tight end. I was trying to watch the receivers in particular, but I tell you, you just can't take your eyes off these tight ends. You just can't. And, you know, Darnell Washington looks like, I mean, he literally makes a lot of the guys that stand near him look like children sometimes. He's just that big. And you obviously have your eyes drawn towards him. I think that's true for Eric Gilbert a little bit there as well. The other guy, though, that I just came away from having watched a little bit of this practice really kind of taken aback by was Oscar Delp. And we saw Delp had a good day at G-Day. But seeing Delp, you know, going through this practice, first of all, he looks the part. He's very, you know, very much an imposing presence out there on the field. Very big, filled out guy. You know, to be an incoming freshman, sometimes you might, you know, expect less than that, but he's obviously been here for a few months now. The nutrition, the strength and conditioning program is clearly working really well for him. And all of a sudden, I start having to rethink this a little bit about Oscar Delp, because my assumption is, well, incoming freshman, he's going to be slotted behind the Gilberts and the Washingtons, along with Brock Bowers, obviously expect to have a great season. But I'll tell you this, you put Oscar Delp on a lot of college fields with a lot of college teams, I think he just about would have stood, been a standout amongst almost any place you want to put him. That's how sort of good I thought he looked going through a very simple drill. I'm not telling you he lit the world on fire going through this drill, but there's just a little bit of a wow factor about the way that he looks. And I thought it was kind of also funny that Kirby Smart, and talking about how the pass catchers performed during the scrimmage, he also briefly mentioned Delp there as well, maybe echoing some of the stuff that I had seen with my own eyes. This is Smart from Saturday on those pass catchers.
Dylan Bell made some plays today. Jackson Meeks made some plays today. If you're counting him as young, because nowadays sophomores not young, sophomores old. 40% of our team, 35% of our team is freshmen. So, I thought Dylan Bell stepped up and made some plays and flashes. Oscar made some plays at tight end, counting him as a receiving weapon. So those guys continue to do a good job, but we just don't have the depth at receiver. I thought Rosemead did a good job today. AD made a few plays. But we're going to have to be really good on the perimeter to be explosive. We've got good tight ends, but we've got to be good outside to complement the tight ends. And we need to get Denylin back, and we need to get Dylan Bell rolling to get where we need to get it wide out.
And at some point this week, we're going to focus a little bit more on Dylan Bell, because Smart obviously mentions him a lot there. But the theory that I was kind of operating on going into that practice on Saturday is that I think there's a real opportunity for pass catchers at Georgia. And who knows, maybe these tight ends just really are just the best pass catchers on the team, and maybe they'll dominate the stat sheet for Georgia here this year. But Smart obviously says, you got to have more from the receivers too. So here's what I went back and looked at. Let me see if I can explain this in a way that makes it make sense. So if you look at Kirby Smart's 6 years so far at Georgia, he's going into year 7 here right now, that of the top 3 receivers in each year under Kirby, in every year but one, he has had one guy of his top 3 receivers who was also a top 3 receiver based on yards from the previous year there as well. In 2019, though, none of Georgia's top 3 receivers were top 3 receivers the previous year too. So let me say this in a different way. Of the 18 potential spots for top 3 receivers in the 6 years that Kirby Smart's been at Georgia, 12 of those 18 were not top 3 receivers the previous year. So you've got a lot of changeover in terms of your top receivers year over year at Georgia. Now, that's a pretty common thing in college football across the board now, because of productive receivers move on to the NFL. Unproductive receivers maybe move on to the transfer portal. So what Georgia has going on in terms of the transient nature of the wide receiver position, or just the pass catching position, is probably not all that unique compared to the rest of college football now. But what it does speak to in 2022 is that there will be opportunities for newcomers, whether it's a newcomer just arriving here for the first time like Dylan Bell, more on him later on this week, or a guy coming back after being away like Dominic Blaylock, or Keiris Jackson, who played last year but not a ton at wide receiver because he was dealing with his own injury, or a guy like Oscar Delp, maybe kind of sort of jumping the line a little bit and getting more opportunities than maybe you would expect a true freshman to get, just given the depth that Georgia has at the tight end position. I think for now we don't quite know who it's going to be, but I think you could expect to see some new faces dominating the stat sheet for Georgia when it comes to catching the ball if this season is like previous seasons under Smart. And so I tried to watch that myself when I was at practice on Saturday, and as we all kind of watch and listen closely to the things that take place throughout the rest of this camp for UGA, that's one of those topics that I think we'll all continue to be quite curious about. That's Around the Doghouse. It's assisted today by our friends at AAA, and of course we're happy to have AAA as a part of what we do here around here, but also happy to have them when it comes to their great insurance products there as well. You trust them for roadside assistance, but you can also think about them when it comes to your auto insurance too, because when you switch and save your auto insurance with AAA, you can save on average $472 right here in Georgia. So dog fans, get your auto insurance through AAA, and you can save some real good money. So call this number, 833-718-2075. I'll give it to you one more time. 833-718-2075, and that'll give you a chance to save big bucks on your auto insurance when you switch and save with our friends at AAA. All right, it's great to have you here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We got a fun show going to roll on for you. Before we're done, I told you this. There is an issue that's been on my mind a lot as of late, kind of a benchmark that I think that Georgia needs to achieve here this season, and I asked Kirby Smart directly on Saturday if he thought that was also true, or at least I gave him a chance to say whether he thought that was true, and he gave a very interesting answer both about his expectations for the team and what he saw on Saturday when it comes to the pass rush. So we're going to talk to Kirby Smart about that here coming up in a couple of minutes' time. Also, a lot of Florida fans kind of flying all over the place online, crawling out of their cave to kind of give me some grief about some recruiting wins they picked up over the course of the weekend. So we'll talk about why they were coming at me over the weekend. We'll do that before we're done here today. But for now, on everything related to UGA after its first scrimmage, after kind of where things stand with the preparations for the Oregon Ducks and the position battles and all that's going on there, let's get ready to talk to our buddy Jon Stinchcomb. We call this DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We're glad to have Jon and all of you on board with us here today.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Always great to have Jon's insight here on DawgNation Daily, and tap dance there for a minute, make sure we got him ready to go, and now we're rocking and rolling and ready to go. Jon, thanks for your time, and if you don't mind, I kind of want to begin with some of what we kind of heard from Georgia on Saturday, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe you were in attendance on Saturday, but if you were, we'll certainly look forward to hearing from you about that, but I don't believe you were. But the point is, a little bit of a turf toe type situation for Tate Ratledge, who's been working at right guard, and I think has the potential to be one of the tone setters for Georgia with its offensive line. I like Ratledge a lot, but not there and not available on Saturday. Not maybe as serious as the Liz Frank situation he was dealing with before, but what kind of turf toe? What kind of turf toe limitation do you think that could provide for Tate Ratledge? Is that something you'd be worried about, knowing that it held him out on Saturday?
Yes. Turf toe, I don't know the degree as to which his ligaments are damaged and that kind of thing, but turf toe can linger. It's become quite a pain for a lot of folks. It's ended some careers. I'm thinking of Jonathan Ogden and Carl Nix, or two offensive linemen specifically, that massive, huge humans that towards the end of their career ended up stopped playing because of turf toe. And I'm giving doomsday scenarios right there in comparison to what Tate has. Hopefully, it's like most things that are ligament related that you treat them and get better. But it certainly isn't something that should be turned a blind eye to. If you don't address it, it can become a real issue. So I feel confident that Ron Corson and the staff over there, the medical staff, will get Tate the care that he needs. But when you think about these 300-pound men, you're talking about just a toe. Well, it's also the foundation that you build that entire structure on. So it's one that you have to really stay on top of and address early so it doesn't linger all season long. Yeah,
it seems like this time of year we talk a lot about offensive linemen and their feet, whether it's them taking care of their feet or their feet sort of stepping on other people. These foot injuries are a pretty common thing this time of year, and it seems like for some of the skill position players, sometimes that kind of comes because maybe, hey, in a rep situation, whatever else, a foot sort of gets stepped on, like both in terms of establishing the base for the offensive lineman that they do stand on, but also that little tap dance that goes on of linemen learning to move together, and that's kind of what this time of year is about. Pretty common sometimes for a quarterback to get that foot stepped on. That's kind of the not quite so much fun part of this time of year as these big offensive linemen learn where to put their feet, right?
Oh, absolutely. I'm laughing because I think back the first few years that I played next to Jari Evans, who has the potential to be a Hall of Famer, just a great talent. But coming out of Bloomsburg, his technique was not all that great. I'll just tell you, just great player, very natural. Technique not great. So he would constantly step on my left foot. We're playing on the right side of the line. He'd step on my right foot to the point where he broke my little toe. And, you know, what do you do for a little toe? It's broken. You can't do anything about it. It's not like you're taping it up or buddy wrapping it. So I'm playing with this broken toe. He continues to just crush it. I'm just getting, it's not like I'm in tears. It's you know, broken toe that's getting mashed by a 340-pound mammoth next to me on a daily recurring basis. So the equipment guys ended up making me this like hard plastic cover for my shoe so that every time he stepped on it, it wasn't re-breaking at that toe there. So, yeah, creating that concerted effort across 5 guys is sometimes more of a challenge than people realize. But, there's a lot of toes getting stepped on out there.
So I've talked to a lot of people who saw the scrimmage, and for some of those people, they've seen this kind of scrimmage over the course of the last few years. And one of the things that I've kind of heard is this was a way better day for the offense than maybe some of the scrimmages they've seen in the past. Kirby Smart kind of echoed that himself a little bit on Saturday. And, you know, I guess you can take that to kind of mean a few things. First of all, if you are a Georgia fan hoping for an upgraded performance on offense as good as the Dogs were a year ago, maybe this is evidence of that, or maybe it's evidence of, hey, you know, Georgia's in the midst of trying to replace a lot of guys defensively. We've all joked in the past about, well, is it good news for the side that wins or bad news for the side that loses? But the sense that I got from hearing from people who were there, it was definitely a different-looking scrimmage they'd seen in the past where, hey, maybe in previous years you might go all day with seeing hardly any touchdown score, but it sounded like there were more of that on Saturday, at least based on kind of the account that I was given. What do you take from that it sounds like the offense had a far better day than the defense did?
I'm not surprised. I think the offense is further along. You have so many more pieces that are returning, and you've progressed to the point where, you know, your quarterback, Stetson Bennett, has actually been in the system for a year and knows how to win and at high levels. You just added pieces where the defense is in a little bit more of a rebuilding situation because of the number of different players and personnel that they've replaced. Now, that's no excuse. You can't just say, well, it's certainly Oregon isn't going to come and give you any caveats of you're replacing pieces. Everyone is. So it's not surprising at this scrimmage that the offense might be a little further along in their development and the chemistry that they've created, but that doesn't mean sound the alarm that, you know, the defense is so far behind and what are they going to do? That's the nature of this beast. In some scrimmage situations, there's going to be a winner and a loser. And I would honestly be a little bit surprised at this point in training camp if, you know, the offense wasn't able to create opportunities and you weren't able to move the ball. But I think that will only get a little bit tighter as you're identifying the 11, 13, 15 guys on defense that are going to rotate in there and become your main contributors once season starts.
I mentioned the fact that I got a chance to be there on Saturday, at least for the media viewing portion of the practice prior to the scrimmage. It's pretty unusual for me to be in Athens because I'm obviously here in the Atlanta area during the week and don't get a chance to be a part of the, you know, during the week coverage that goes on there at UGA. But on Saturday, I had a chance to be there, and I wanted to watch the pass catchers in particular, and I was trying to watch wide receiver when I could. As I joked with our audience before, it's sort of hard to take your eyes off the tight ends. They just cast such an imposing shadow out there on that practice field. You end up sort of looking at them even when you're trying to look at something different. But I do think, John, there's both an opportunity for a wide receiver to step up, and if you listen to Kirby a little bit on Saturday, a necessity for that there as well, that if you want to get this big production out of the tight ends that's possible, well, you've got to have those outside threats that keep the defense honest here. And, you know, maybe that's more of A.D. Mitchell and Ladd McConkey, kind of like Georgia got last year. Maybe that means, you know, guys coming back from injury like Karras and Dominic Blaylock can be a part of this. Dylan Bell's a freshman who's kind of earning some chatter. Our buddy Terrence Edwards has talked some about him even prior to the buzz that he's gotten here this summer. But when I look at wide receiver, John, I see both the opportunity for someone to emerge and probably the necessity that someone really kind of has to emerge if this Georgia offense is going to fire on all cylinders the way that it's capable of. And I'm not quite so sure that stands here at the moment.
Well, I think if you look at historically this Todd Monken offense, wide receivers specifically, they rotate guys in constantly. So the A.D. Mitchells of the world from last year, where he's a young guy, comes in and you're just looking at various ways to highlight his skill set. I think we can expect the same, if not some, very similar, from a deployment status and for this offense, that they're going to rotate guys in and try to find the best situation to highlight their skill set. So even though there might not be that one guy, I mean, obviously there's some concern if you're stretching the field and Arian Smith isn't available just because of his elite speed, which, sounds like there's some injury concern there. But there is a number of young guys that, if you're looking at a full profile, they might not be ready for 60 snaps a game, but can they add 10 or 12 and bring value when they're out there? I think that's probably more realistic for some of these younger guys to get those opportunities.
We heard a very specific compliment from Kirby Smart on Saturday that I think could matter for the Dogs here this fall. I want to talk to you about that here in a moment, John. Before that, let me remind folks about something really fun that's going on at DawgNation.com right now. It's our Atlanta Braves fan poll where Georgia fans get a chance to weigh in at DawgNation.com on their opinion about UGA for the upcoming year. In fact, we have a great one related to fantasy football drafts. A lot of folks getting ready to have their fantasy draft, and one of the fun things about the NFL right now is there are so many former Dogs so prominently mentioned among the very best in the NFL, including in your fantasy drafts there too. So which Dog do you think is going to be drafted first in fantasy leagues here this year? Nick Chubb, DeAndre Swift, George Pickens, or maybe even McCole Hardman? So you got a few answers to choose from there. At DawgNation.com, you can participate in our DawgNation fan poll presented by the Atlanta Braves. And don't forget, we're going to be contacting our fourth winner here coming up for that family 4-pack of tickets for the Atlanta Braves. And a lot of you have already kind of claimed your prize there on that. If you have, congratulations. But if you haven't, you can get signed up for your chance to win there at DawgNation.com there as well. So register, and you could be soon finding out you're a winner of our family 4-pack of tickets for the Atlanta Braves as the Braves join us for our Dog Nation fan poll right there on the pages of DawgNation.com. So, John, before you joined us, one of the things that we played, some audio of Kirby Smart, in particular talk about Kenny McIntosh, but kind of a similar statement about Dajon Edwards there as well. And we know the situation for Georgia at running back. You've got a couple of incoming freshmen, Branson Robinson, Andrew Paul, both those guys getting folks excited, and I think with good reason. We're going to talk more about them later on in the week. Kendall Milton, I think everybody believes, is a very fun running back for Georgia and a very valuable piece of this Georgia team. Was not able to practice on Saturday because of a hamstring issue, but when he's healthy, he's clearly a weapon for the Dogs. But on Saturday, chatter about Kenny McIntosh, chatter about Dajon Edwards, and the compliment that Smart uses is, McIntosh has had a great camp. Dajon Edwards has had a very good camp. John, that's one of those statements that kind of means something to me because I think this time of year is about setting the tone for the season as much as it is about learning a playbook or getting your body in shape. It's about kind of establishing the identity for your team. Clearly last year, that's something that Georgia did very well, both in terms of the chemistry and bond it had together, but also in terms of the way in which it played the game, sort of a selfless team-first attitude. That's sometimes sounds like coach speak. For Georgia a year ago, I think it was real. And I think that on the offensive side this year, guys like McIntosh and Edwards who've shown some patience about being reserve players, but now in maybe a bigger role here this season, I get the sense from Kirby on Saturday that he thinks they could help set that tone in part for that position group, at least for Georgia here this season. And I do think that could matter for the Dogs. Do you agree?
Yes, I think there is a number of really, really talented players in that running back room that can help Georgia, and that's a good thing, and it's going to be a needed thing because when you have Stetson returning and this balance, you have so many weapons and the edge and tight end. I know this is a conversation about running backs, and all of a sudden I've talked about quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends, but I think you look at the way offenses are played right now, and you get opportunities for the run game from the pass game and vice versa. We have historically created opportunities in the pass game based on the run. I don't think that changes, but I do think the balance starts to shift a little bit. The ask for Stetson Bennett isn't going to be to throw the ball 35, 40 times a game like quarterbacks are in other places. So the reliance on running backs though it might become a little more balanced, to be able to have guys that play at a high level is a staple at Georgia, and it's not just one, right? It's not that one running back, and I agree. All the reports that I've heard is Kenny McIntosh has looked like that next guy that Georgia continually has at running back that you feature and then you complement around it. The scrimmage certainly did get the attention for Branson and Paul fans just because of their physicality and the ability to make that one cut and break tackles, which, that's the fun part of this time of year. Is this isn't 7-on-7 underwear ball that it's all pretty and everything's nice. Now you get guys that can run over some folks and break through tackles that for the past few months, when it's just basically a glorified version of flag football, it's no longer the case. So you like that kind of diversity in your room of guys that certainly can catch the ball out of the backfield and make plays in space, but when it's between the tackles, they can break through some of those arm tackles and get you the yards that come for big plays after the tackles do get broken.
Jon, great stuff. Thank you so much for being here today. I love your insight on everything related to the Dogs. I know you're as excited as I am about the start of the upcoming season. Going to be here before you know it, and I can't wait for it. So thank you for your time, and we'll look forward to speaking to you here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, again very, very soon.
Always enjoy it, VA. Go Dogs.
Yes, sir.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Love that insight from Jon Stinchcomb. Always great to have him as a part of our program and what we're doing around here each and every day. So that's really good stuff. And now let's get ready to go cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Obviously, this is a great time to be a part of a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. I had a chance to talk to one of our folks of the day. He's got, hey, I got a cruise vacation coming up. I'm being on a Royal Caribbean cruise ship. He says he's going to be on Harmony of the Seas. And Harmony of the Seas is actually the ship that I was on this past February, and I loved it. To me, I love the big ships. I love, and for Royal Caribbean, like the biggest class of all is that Oasis class of ship, because you've got so many different distinctive neighborhoods. I mean, it's really like being in a city on the sea. When you think about like the Boardwalk neighborhood, it's almost like being on Coney Island or something like that. You've got like a carousel that you can ride like right there in the ship, but you've also got a lot of cool like specialty restaurants kind of around that area. And it really is like being in a Coney Island-style boardwalk, except you're on the cruise ship. You've also got like a Central Park neighborhood on a ship like that. It's so quaint and enjoyable to walk around that, in the evening or at nighttime, because you've got like the real live like foliage, and it looks like a park. It's once again a lot of cool specialty restaurants. It's literally like walking through a city, and yet you're on a cruise ship. The Royal Promenade kind of works the same way. That's kind of an interior portion of the ship, but it's also, when you're walking through there, you feel like you are, you could be anywhere. I mean, it's an amazing experience to know that all of this takes place on a cruise ship. It's one of the reasons why I think you ought to just explore. You ought to learn more about all the options that are available to you, all the really cool stuff there. Our friends at the Cruise and Vacation Authority can help you out with that. You can check them out online at tcava.com. That's tcava.com. You can also give them a call, 770-952-8300. That's 770-952-8300, and get booked up on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation today. I think that's just a great time as we head towards the end of 2022. Start thinking early 2023. You got some great opportunities to take advantage of a great chance to be back on the seas again with our friends at Royal Caribbean. I hope you'll do just that. All right, let's go cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And I got to tell you, I am really starting to get a little worried about Florida fans. I really am. I feel like that they are really showing themselves to be, I think, less than what they once were. And listen, this was a really good weekend for Florida. Around here, we don't have to, hide from that. We speak the truth. We call balls and strikes wherever the pitch may land. And Florida got itself three in the last few days alone. Three very good defensive line prospects. Cameron James out of IMG, Will Norman, Kelby Collins is a name that obviously was of note for Georgia fans, and for right now, all three of these guys stand as Florida commits. That's a nice run for Florida in recruiting. And from time to time, this sort of happens where like a fan base will kind of grab onto one of my old tweets, and they'll like come firing it back at me like years later about something. And there were like a lot of Florida fans kind of like firing back at me this week because of something I said about Billy Napier at one point in time based on whatever they interpreted that tweet to mean. They all think they're really funny and cute when they do that, which is fine. I don't even really notice because I don't have notifications turned on my phone. So you can, for the most part, attack me on Twitter all you want to. I will literally never be aware of it because I don't have notifications turned on. But the point here is that if you look at these wins for Florida in recruiting as of late, the James, the Norman Collins, they're all good, all 4-star defensive linemen. It's the kind of thing that Florida, at the very least, has to have to even be somewhat competitive. But let's not forget this here. While Florida has a large number of 4-star commits for its 2023 class, it is only now just entered the top 10. It only has 2 current commits who are rated on the 24/7 Sport Composite Player Rating. Only 2 players currently rated within the top 100. Like, this is essentially right now for Florida a Dan Mullen class. Congratulations to Sling Blade here. Billy Napier, he has worked his way back up to a Dan Mullen style of class. The coach that was fired for not being a very good recruiter. Well, what Napier is doing is essentially right now producing a Dan Mullen style class. Now, if you're a Florida fan, you say, what about all them 17 4-stars, whatever else? Y'all, go look at other classes in recent SEC history. I mean, a few years ago, Gus Malzahn had like 17 or 18 4-stars in his recruiting class. They didn't win anything because if you're talking about 4-stars who are rated in like the 300s overall, that's going to have a hard time allowing you to keep pace with the schools that at one point in time you would have considered your contemporaries. Certainly a rival like Georgia or even a program across the league like a LSU or an Alabama, the teams like that, LSU who currently Florida plays every year. If you don't recruit better than you're recruiting right now, you're going to have a hard time keeping pace. And so, the idea that you would celebrate being in the top 10, that's what you're supposed to do. It's the same thing like these Florida fans who will sometimes kind of pop in our show and say, what are you going to do when we come out and beat Utah? You're an SEC team hosting a team from Salt Lake. You're supposed to win that game. You're supposed to beat Utah. SEC teams don't lose week 1, week 2, non-conference games to Power 5 opponents. The SEC has a long history of dominating in those contests. If you do lose to Utah, don't show your face around here anytime soon. You're going to be a point spread favorite in the game. I don't care how highly rated Utah is to start the season. You're playing at home. They're traveling 2,000 miles to get here. You're supposed to win that game. And Florida being ranked in the top 10 in recruiting right now, that's what you're supposed to do. They have, already about 2/3 of the roster former 4- and 5-star recruits anyway. So the idea that anyone's going to fall all over themselves because Billy Napier has collected a handful of 4-star recruits, including 3 within the last couple of days, which is not an insignificant feat. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not downplaying this. I'm just downplaying the overall trajectory for the Florida recruiting class overall. If all you're really talking about is a couple of guys rated in the top 100, then you've had a good but not great recruiting cycle. Now, we'll see if that changes in the time that comes. But for now, it's good. It's not great. It's at the bare minimum of what Florida should be expected to do. And that's really, for me, the most troubling thing for a lot of these Gators fans is you just really get the impression they've forgotten what they used to be, or maybe they no longer aspire to be that anymore, or maybe more accurately stated, no longer believe those kinds of aspirations are even possible for a program like Florida. That's how much guys like Jim McElwain and Dan Mullen have eroded the trust of the so-called Gator Nation. So that's the scenario that Billy Napier inherits there at Florida, and we'll see how he handles with all of that. But it's just amazing the meager level of accomplishment that causes Florida fans to want to try to spike the football here these days. It is not what it used to be there for that program. I thought it was very interesting to see Kentucky coach Mark Stoops fire back again at John Calipari. Was asked about the situation and was ready with the answer. And let me tell you something. He is not backing down on all this. And I got to tell you, I find myself solidly on Team Stoops in this. He kind of used the same line that Jim Harbaugh used about Ryan Day, about a program that thinks it was born on third base, but thinks it hits a triple or has hit a triple. And in the case of Calipari, I sort of think that's kind of true. I mean, in life, some people would say we kind of can be divided into, like, say, makers and takers. And I think that Calipari sort of thinks he's a maker, but in aggregate, he's actually probably more of a taker in terms of, the situation that he left UMass with and Memphis with after he left the program, or the way in which he inherited a Kentucky program that really is truly among the absolute elite blue bloods in the history of that sport, but what has he won recently, including losing the first round to St. Peter's this past year? I think the way in which Calipari sees himself and the way in which increasingly folks around Calipari see him, I think there's a huge disconnect there. And I think there are a lot of people who say, relative to the resources and the cost of doing business, a guy like Mark Stoops is actually having more success with the football team than Calipari is with the basketball team. And there are a lot of Kentucky fans who I think get a little restless. I've told you before, I think being a Kentucky basketball fan might be the most unsatisfying experience of any kind of sports fandom whatsoever. You get great recruits. They go on to be great in the NBA. They do nothing while they're at Kentucky, and I think you have to point the finger of blame on that to Calipari. It's one thing if you want to be a talent scout and run an AAU-type training facility. It's another thing if you actually want to win games at the college level. And Calipari, in my mind, is not doing nearly enough of that to have anything to say to anybody, much less a guy like Mark Stoops, who, relative to the resources at Kentucky, is actually winning more than almost any Kentucky football coach has any right to be able to say that he's doing. So put me on the side of Stoops there on that, and good to see him firing back at Calipari once again. And also the fact that this soap opera is not really dying down anytime soon. We're in a different age now where, Jimbo and Saban go back and forth very publicly with each other, and now infighting at Kentucky, the two high-profile coaches going back and forth with each other. A lot of stuff that used to be kept in-house ain't really being kept in-house anymore, and I think that's kind of interesting. We'll make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And turning our attention back to the Dogs here just for a moment. So here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, I mentioned I don't get to go to Athens very much. Don't live in Athens. I attend the games there and go to practice whatnot when I can, but I'm always here doing a show, so that doesn't give me much opportunity to be there in Athens, but was there on Saturday. And I wanted to pose a question to Smart, because Smart mentioned that he wasn't super thrilled, I think that's what he said, super thrilled with the pass rush that he saw from his team there on Saturday, and he goes into more detail in a moment as to why, but it gave me a chance to kind of ask him about one of the things we talk about around here, which is, hey, if you look at Georgia defensively last season, some of the important statistical benchmarks were actually not too dissimilar from previous Georgia years. Georgia has had years in the past, including the last full season in 2019, where it gave up almost as few points per game as it gave up last year. Or yards per rush, they've had moments which they've given up almost as little per carry as they gave up last year. Yards per pass attempt, they've had moments in the past where they've almost matched what they did a year ago. That for as great and historic as the Georgia defense was thought to be last season, the truth is that Georgia has had years where a lot of the key statistics related to that defense were actually somewhat similar. However, there is the one stat for 2021 that stands out way from the pack of everything else. Georgia had 49 sacks last season. That's a 15-game schedule, but still 49 sacks, a mammoth total, far more than Georgia's had in any previous season under Kirby Smart, including back in 2017, the other year in which Georgia made the playoff and played a full 15-game schedule. Georgia's never had the sack total that it had last year under Smart, and I asked Smart, understanding that you had this big sack total a year ago, do you have any kind of internal program goals for matching a similar number this season? And Smart says, no, we don't, but I'll give you the full answer here from Kirby.
There's not internally a goal. We don't put a sack goal. We put an effective quarterback goal, and we all know that's not fun for you guys because you want to talk sack totals. We want to talk batted balls, interceptions, knockdown, hurries. You affect the quarterback with multiple rushes. And, Robert Beal is having a quietly good camp, which is good for us. A lot of times these scrimmages get skewed. Now, last year was a outlier because of the front and the people we had. But these scrimmages get skewed because you take so many snaps. Pass rushing is an effort play. And a lot of sacks are what we call hustle sacks, effort sacks. You don't necessarily win. You give a great second effort. Well, there comes a point in the scrimmage today where they take so many snaps, nobody's fresh, and the offensive lineman stays in front of them. We didn't have – it reminded me of our old scrimmages where we didn't have great pass rush, not because we don't have pass rushers. We just didn't have the juice that we needed. And I can't say that it was like that last year, but it's been like that in years past.
So let me just say this here really quickly. I don't take the idea that he didn't love the pass rush and the scrimmage to mean all that much for the reason that Smart stated there, that, listen, you try to simulate real football during a scrimmage, for the most part, those who were there will tell you it looks like football. However, when you are doing kind of the same thing over and over again, eventually the players do get fatigued. And I think there's even some chatter about how much certain players even played that would have contributed to this pass rush situation. So a lot of that you just sort of chalk up to kind of a scrimmage vibe. You don't make much out of that. However, if I would have had a chance in a conversation to kind of, respond back to what Kirby said about affecting the quarterback and things like that, obviously we would all agree that affecting the quarterback is valuable. You want to be able to do that. You want to make the job of the quarterback tougher. But to me, and we hear coaches say this all the time, and my response in every single instance would be, well, it's good to affect the quarterback and it's good to deflect passes, and clearly you want to do all that kind of stuff. That creates opportunities for turnovers, interception, things like that. When you're facing a really good offense, you have to have negative plays. The most valuable thing about a sack is not that you affect the quarterback, although clearly you do. It's that you move the football backwards. And that's what Georgia defensively was so good at a year ago. They moved the football backwards. There were more drives for Georgia last season that the offense went negative than were resulting in a score. That's what Georgia did defensively last year. They moved people backwards more often than the offense moved into the end zone. And if you want to be some version of that here this year, you've got to find a way to replicate that through sacks and through tackles for loss. Now, deep down, I think Kirby knows that. I just don't think he wants to kind of put it out there that way, which is fine. That certainly is prerogative. But there is no substitution for a quarterback staring up looking at the lights. There is no substitution for that. National championship game, that's what Bryce Young was dealing with. SEC championship game, you didn't get to him, and you know how that result turned out. So Kirby may not want to give voice to that, and obviously he's got every right to say whatever he wants to. But deep down, we all know that what made Georgia special a year ago was the activity in the backfield. More tackles for loss, way more sacks than ever before. And if you want to have another great season from Georgia defensively, maybe not the greatest of all time the way that 2021 was, but maybe the greatest in the country here for this upcoming season, then a big sack total, a lot of activity behind the line of scrimmage, going to be paramount in importance for Georgia on defense once again. And as we say goodbye to you here today, we will do so with our golden shoe, kind of a fun one related to what a lot of you enjoyed over the course of the weekend, some preseason football. How about the Pittsburgh Steelers? A little bit of interesting stuff coming out of there, including, not for nothing here, George Pickens, a beautiful touchdown. And there was a meme that kind of went around of Pickens sort of watching himself. You remember the draft day thing where Pickens was like shaking his head when he saw himself drafted on television? Had a little bit of a odd look to him that kind of went viral. And so now folks are taking that and they're showing the picture of the Pickens touchdown with that together. The NFL even made that their Twitter header, like the official NFL account, which probably has gosh knows how many millions of followers. They put Pickens right there on the top of that. The Steelers retweet that. Our buddy Tyler Bannister shares that with me to say good content. You better believe it is. We love to see Pickens over the weekend, man. That's great to see. Tyler, thanks for sharing that. We'll make you a golden shoe winner. Lousy stinking Gators. How about 4,967 days? That's how long it's been since they've won a national championship, and ironically, 4,967. Also, about the average rating for the recruit in the Florida class here right now. No, I'm kidding when I say that. They got a couple 4 stars. They're happy right now. Let me see that Gator hater countdown one more time, though. How about 75 days from now? Florida back in Jacksonville, Georgia back in Jacksonville, and Billy Neighbor's going to find out what the cocktail party rivalry is all about as the Dogs beat up on them one more time. That is DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and we will see you back here again tomorrow. And on video. Time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. You can find them on all of that today. They'll get your air conditioning unit tuned back up to factory fresh specs, so make sure you check them out today. All right, let's get your comments here. I have YouTube kind of already pulled up, so I'll get some comments here, and then we'll bounce around to the other spots after that. Jay says Facebook comments are putting folks to sleep over here daily. Hurry them up. Paul Moon says, crazy to think how last year we would have gone with Pickens. We're probably still talking about Bowers' potential rather than his actual performance last season. Yeah, you do kind of wonder that. How much the Bowers breakout year was aided by the Pickens injury. The Darnell Washington injury near the beginning of the season that may have given more of a focal point to Brock Bowers. Now, I think that Bowers has turned out to be a special enough of a talent that he would have shown himself to be certainly something regardless, but clearly there would have been a lot of targets going the way of George Pickens, and it's one of the reasons why all of the silly stuff from Alabama fans about their wide receiver injuries, when you see what Pickens is doing in Pittsburgh and realize that Georgia played without him for virtually the entirety of last season, it just sort of tells you how silly some of the Alabama excuses have been. JC says, have they said how long Arian Smith is out for? Here's what we do know. That coming off an ankle surgery like this, it's at least going to be a few weeks. Now, last year, here's what happened. Every one of these, 4 to 6 week type injury type things turned out to be on the top end of that, if not far longer. That, everything that was at first sort of thought to be not all that serious ended up dragging along for kind of a while. So I think for now, I'm going to assume that every Georgia injury is probably a little bit more serious than it's sort of projected to be or portrayed to be. I'm not a doctor, not a medical person, but if I had to bet on the longer side or the shorter side when it comes to Smith, I guess I'd probably bet on the longer side. Now, that doesn't mean he's not going to play it all again this year, but if you think about the kind of injury that lasts more than half the season, less than half the season, I guess I'd probably lean in the direction of the more substantial nature of that. Let's see what else. Aaron Dixon says excuses is the problem within our country. Bama's just following suit. Don't disagree with that. Kirby's Visor says Darius Smith Jr. already crushing it at UGA. Yeah, listen, I'm looking forward to him. We've told you before. I know his proud papa hangs out in our comment section from time to time. When you watch Darius run the way that he does in track with that big long frame, how is that not a pass rusher? When you got that kind of speed, when you got that kind of size, how is that not a pass rusher? I sort of feel like you're heading for something pretty good for him eventually, for sure. Jay says that UGA held me out for 9 weeks for biting my tongue, which is funny. Let's see what else. JC says, I just hate it for him that he can be so good in this offense he can't catch a break. I do too. And listen, let's say you did get him back sometime in November. Let's just say that did happen. Well, there's still a chance that on like a per play basis, a guy like Arian Smith could still have a really big catch for you. And listen, when you're a home run hitter like that, it doesn't take, but a couple of catches to sort of change the tone of a season. It doesn't. So I'm not quite ready to wave the white flag on him yet, but I agree with your overall sentiment is like one of the things that, if you just want to be like really, really candid for a moment, there were a lot of Florida fans who were like really, really sad when they didn't get Arian because they thought they were going to, or maybe they thought they should, or they just desperate for whatever help they could get. And so they kind of started trashing him when he chose UGA. Like one of the things a lot of Florida fans were saying on a lot of message boards is that he was just a track guy and he can't really catch, that he's not a real wide receiver. He's just a guy that can run. Well, I think that one of the things that Arian Smith has proven is that he can catch the football. Like Arian Smith is a real wide receiver, that he's not just a track guy trying to make that transition. Like he really is a wide receiver. Now, that's all the more reason why you're left to wonder, well, what could he be if he could just stay healthy for a full year? And I don't have anything to add on that other than what y'all have already said. It seems like he could be really, really good, and it seems like he has just had the worst rotten injury luck. And, sometimes we say this about the Bama guys. We'll say this about the Georgia guys there too. Sometimes that body type is going to have a little bit of a harder time, right? I mean, the kind of way you build your body so that you have that great speed, and you have to have these players in your program. You have to have the blazing speed. And there's only kind of a couple of ways to sort of build your body for that blazing speed. But I just believe it's going to make you susceptible to certain injuries from time to time. And there's just not much you can do about that. I don't blame him. I don't. I don't know why you would. I don't blame Georgia. I don't know why you would. Injuries are just a part of the game. And there's a phrase in baseball, and you got to be careful how you say this. It's called cluster luck. In other words, you step up to the plate, maybe you get a hit, maybe you don't. But every now and then you have a lot of hits within the same inning, and all of a sudden that creates a big inning for you, and that's not necessarily the most predictive stat moving forward. Like if you have one of these situations where you've had a lot of hits in a row, that's not exactly a sustainable thing. The point here is that sometimes you have just sort of a cluster of luck. Once again, be careful how you say that. A cluster of luck kind of together, either a string of good or bad luck, and that doesn't make it any less random. Sometimes people have a tendency to want to kind of connect things together because they seem to follow a pattern, and sometimes bad luck is just unconnected. It just happens. I mean, we can all tell stories in our own life of a series of bad luck happening over and over and over again, and you feel like, wait, somebody out to get me? Or is this just kind of a series of bad luck type things? And the case of Arian Smith, I don't have any reason to believe there's anything more than just sort of a cluster of bad luck that's come his way, but it is no less true. Let's go to Facebook here for a moment. Also, let us know how you think the show is sounding. Like I said, we kind of got a little bit of a new audio setup here, and I'm curious to know your thoughts on how you think it's sounding. If you've got any thoughts on that, you can kind of weigh in on that. Phil Rogers wants to see that 4 tight end set. Yeah, I'd love to see it too, just because it'd be kind of a cool thing, kind of a payoff for a lot of UGA fans who've been kind of calling for it, it seems like. Alan McGovern says, I'm not worried about the wide receivers. Blaylock, Jackson, Marcus Rosemy-Jackson, A.D. Mitchell, along with the tight ends, were in great shape. You certainly could be right about that, but it seems like, Alan, just to be kind of honest, we always seem to say this every year of, gosh, you look at all the guys this could be. And I don't disagree with anybody that you mentioned. I like Marcus Rosemy-Jackson a lot, and we probably don't talk about him right now as much as we should. I like Dominic Blaylock a lot when he's healthy, and it seems like he's healthy again right now. So I could go through that same list with you, and I would probably agree with you. But here's the one thing that Georgia just really needs. They really need one or two of these guys to step out from the pack and kind of break through what's been a little bit of about a 500-yard season ceiling on achievement. Last year, that's kind of what Brock Bowers did as a tight end. He kind of burst through that. On a touchdown basis, he definitely did that. On a receiving yards basis, he became the most prolific single-season receiving guy in the Smart era. George Pickens once kind of did this, and as a freshman in 2019, kind of burst through that sort of 700-yard mark. And if he played this season, I believe he would have gotten to 1,000. I think that Todd Monken said that the other day too. So Georgia's got a lot of talented guys and a lot of potential breakout people. And I sort of don't care who it is. I just need it to be somebody. If you're a UGA fan, I think you know where I'm coming from. That you just sort of need it to be somebody that you can either, whether it be another tight end or one of these wide receivers, somebody to kind of put alongside Bowers who has like the really big year that really helps keep defenses honest. Not necessarily one of these sort of free rotating, ensemble situations, although I'm not against liberal substitutions. I don't have a problem with that necessarily. You just got to have somebody, or maybe a couple of somebodies, that just sort of stand out from the pack. I think that's important for Georgia here this year. Chad Williams says, if UGA's defense struggles early this year, does Georgia look to play another quarterback to help produce more points? I believe if a quarterback was capable of producing more points than Stetson Bennett is, that's who your starting quarterback would be. And I had somebody in particular who saw the scrimmage on Saturday, and this is one person's opinion, so I'm not telling you should take this as the gospel, but one person I talked to in particular who saw the scrimmage said that it was obvious to him from watching. This is not someone who I necessarily consider to be kind of like a Stetson Bennett homer necessarily, but the person who I talked to said that it was obvious to him that Stetson Bennett was the way best of all these quarterbacks, which would stand as news to some of our audience because I don't know that they necessarily agree with that. But at least one person who saw the scrimmage on Saturday, that was his takeaway there on that. As I said before, I'm not telling you that means that it's true. I'm telling you that's what somebody said. That's just one data point of a collection of folks who would have seen a scrimmage. But the overall point is still true, that if Georgia had a quarterback who would produce more points than Stetson Bennett, it's obvious that's who Georgia would play. And the fact that Georgia's not considering another starting quarterback right now would lead you to believe that there is no one who's capable of matching what Bennett gave Georgia a season ago. David Harvey says, will any of these quarterbacks get snaps this year? We need to get 5 quarterbacks. No, he says we need to get these, as a typo, we need to get these quarterbacks some snaps. Yeah, I mean, I think that Georgia's going to play its backup quarterback the way most teams play their backup quarterback. I don't think, and I'm not trying to be sarcastic, I'm just answering the question with it. Sometimes it comes up. I don't believe that Georgia's going to turn the fourth quarter of a blowout game into G-Day. I don't. I don't think it's going to. I don't think it's going to hold scrimmages for the following year. I think it's going to try to win the game that it's in, and I think it's going to try to keep itself, capable of winning the following week's game there too. And I do realize that's not what everybody wants to hear, and I do realize that, there are a lot of people who wish Georgia would use the fourth quarter as like an exhibition for future seasons. But not only does Georgia not do that, really nobody to speak of really does it that way. So you'll see a backup quarterback, probably Carson Beck, if I had to guess right now. You'll see a backup quarterback, I believe, play like backup quarterbacks typically play. And if something happens injury-related, then you could see the apple cart kind of shaking up there a little bit, but that's probably how that's going to go. And, with Stetson Bennett, you'll probably have a season from Bennett where he is at the very least good. He may be better than he was a year ago. There will probably be quarterbacks in the country who are better than him. There are clearly going to be a handful of, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud types who are going to generate a lot of first-round type buzz. That's probably not the kind of conversation that Stetson Bennett is in. But that doesn't stop Georgia from, being in line for all of its in-season goals, because clearly a good quarterback was enough for Georgia a year ago, and an even better version possibly of that good quarterback again this year could be good, more so as well. Sandy Price says, keep your eyes on the players that Kirby's not talking about. That's an interesting statement. Phil Rogers says, hey, score 35 points in the first half, didn't clear the bench. And I do get where people come from on that. Like, listen, I'm a fan no different than any of you. Like, I get why fans kind of want to see that. I do. I just don't think there are a lot of examples of teams that do that. I think I think that a lot of people who watch Georgia very closely assume that other college football teams they don't watch quite so closely do things way different than they do, and they just don't. Now, if you want to see Georgia score more points, because that's what some people want to see. They want to see Georgia tack on points late. I've told you before, the place where you get offense is not by tacking on points late in the game. It's by throwing more haymakers at the beginning of the game. And you've heard me say before, early downs, early in the game. If you have an incompletion on first down, do you come back and throw it again on second down? Because some teams who are, kind of run-oriented, they're not going to throw on 2 consecutive downs if they didn't get good yardage, or I should say if they had an incompletion on first down. That's where Georgia can demonstrate a little bit of commitment to throwing the football. Do you throw it on second down if you go incomplete on first down? And the other thing is, we talked about this last week, will you throw the ball more in the red zone? That's a place where Georgia probably has a little bit of a more conservative mentality. Georgia's overall red zone touchdown percentage last year was not very good. That's a place that if you're looking for more points to kind of turn the offense loose, that's a place that you might see some of that happen, is in the red zone. I certainly hope that's the case, because that's a clear opportunity for Georgia to add more points to what it was doing a year ago. But in terms of, hey, like turn the the backups, whether it be, young wide receivers or young quarterbacks, whatever else, turning them loose late in the game, coaches don't want to make the game any longer than it needs to be. They just don't. In the SEC, you're in a grind week to week. And I know I sound like a coach when I'm saying this, or coach speak type talk when I'm saying this. I'm not. I'm just trying to give you the best explanation for why. Well, why don't you see what you got in some of the other positions? It's because teams are thankful to get a win when they've got one. They don't want to turn an easy win into something more complicated, and they don't want to make a game last any longer than it needs to, knowing you've got another game coming up the following week. I think that's sort of the point there on that. Then that's kind of why they do what they do. Let's see what else. James Stidham says those tight ends should help in the red zone, and I think you're absolutely right about that. I think if you're looking for a place where those guys could really demonstrate their full value to UGA, right down in the red zone may be an example of that. Let's see what else. Ken Feinberg says Miami used to throw it around in the fourth quarter late in the game, and I'll somewhat jokingly say, look what happened to Miami as a program. But I'm kidding, Ken. But that's an interesting point. Good to see you in the comment section here today. Cam Hasty says, I'm pretty excited to see what Dylan Bell looks like. I am there as well. Got a chance to see him in the practice on Saturday for a minute. He had a nice catch while I was watching. And we're going to kind of sort of re-rack some of what Terrence Edwards said about Dylan Bell. We'll probably do that maybe tomorrow. Hemingway says, when the game is in hand, it's about running out the clock and avoiding injuries. Yeah, sometimes in life you meet people who can't take yes for an answer, and sometimes football kind of works the same way, where the version of taking yes for an answer is most coaches don't want to make an easy win into something more complicated than it needs to be. J-Bob says he watched the awesome 2000 Outback Bowl yesterday with Jon Stinchcomb and Terrence Edwards. That's a lot of fun. That's a good blast from the past. Let's see what else. G. Grace Bamba Boy mentioning JoJo Earl dealing with an injury. We've seen Earl get injured. We saw what's his name from Florida get injured the other day. So at least 3 programs dealing with a relatively high-profile wide receiver injury here for the moment. Let's see what else. Paul Moon, talking about blast in the past, 2013. Zach Mettenberger for LSU. Aaron Murray for Georgia, one of the great shootouts in the history of Sanford Stadium, really one of the great games in the history of the stadium. It's kind of funny how few of the big moments in Georgia history have actually happened in Sanford Stadium. I find that to be kind of odd, that if you think about, like, you know, how many great games people say, well, that's because you play Jacksonville every year. Maybe, but think about 82 Georgia-Auburn, 2001 Georgia-Tennessee, 2002 Georgia-Tennessee. Think about how many like great moments for UGA have happened somewhere else other than Sanford Stadium. It's a little bit odd that if you made the list of the 10 biggest moments that have happened in, like, say, true road games and like the 10 biggest moments that happened in Sanford Stadium, it just feels like way bigger things have happened away from Athens. But that 2013 game, one of the biggest to happen in Athens. I guess the list of like big moments in Sanford Stadium, like the 60-yard field goal for Butler and the 13 game against LSU, the 04 game against LSU was a pretty big game there too. I guess 2019 Notre Dame might be mentioned there on that. Kirby's visor, looking forward to more of Ladd McConkey. I would agree with that. TJ Smith says, just moved my daughter into Athens this weekend. She's getting set for the greatest 4 years of her life. That's awesome to see. TJ, please tell her we said we wish her well as she begins her college journey. And I was watching a lot of folks moving in here this weekend. It's always a fun thing to see because you can only imagine how excited they must be about being at Georgia at a time like this. Not just the football team doing so well, but it's just like there's just such a great vibe around Athens. The university community has such a great vibe around it. Like, I mean, you really are, you know, in such a amazing position to be able to be at the University of Georgia right now. It's very easy to be envious of young folks getting ready to start that part of their life. Let's see what else. Paul Moon, the subject of Jermaine Burton. Yeah, I think that Burton's a real talent, and that's another one of those guys that, man, you just kept feeling like, okay, he could really put it together for a full season at Georgia, and it somehow seemed like, you know, for various reasons, that sort of stopped short of happening. Jay says, would you support Screech starting for your Aggies? Who is Screech? I don't know who that is. Chase White says, you think that Kirby's saying he needs a wide receiver for recruiting purposes? Well, I think a lot of things that Kirby Smart says are obviously for recruiting purposes. I think that he obviously, is always thinking about that. And I do think that it's just fair and realistic to say that that's probably the one position group that Georgia really wants to unlock its potential when it comes to recruiting wide receivers, for sure. What did Tennille want to ask? What is Tennille saying here? G. Grace trying to stir up about stuff about why Jermaine Burton left. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we know what Saban said in terms of the pitch they made to him because he went public with it about, come here because our receivers get a lot of yards, a lot of points, things like that. But you've also seen for Alabama what happens when more than one receiver gets promised the same thing. They don't all stay very happy very long. And that's clearly something that Alabama dealt with a year ago. So good luck with all of that. Oh no, I know who like Screech is from Saved by the Bell. Oh, that's what Stetson Bennett's hair. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe so. I don't mind the new look from Stetson either. But like the one photo everybody shares where he's got like the tattoo sleeve, that's fake, right? That's not real, right? He doesn't have that sleeve of tattoos on his arm, does he? There's like that one photo that goes around. That's not real, I don't think. G. Grace Bama Boy says you'll have to stop blaming Saban for everything. I don't blame Saban for anything. But G. Grace, you know this is true because I know you know football. Watch what happens if Bama doesn't win the national title this year, and watch some of those Crimson and Cream, Crimson and White? Watch some of those Crimson folks start blaming Saban for some stuff. You know that's coming. And listen, you know, a guy like Jermaine, who we like, he's going to have a little extra sign on his back because he transferred over there. Matt Rukavina says the new SEC short is a good one. That's good to hear. Appreciate that. Tennille, yeah, I think she's pretty much abandoned Facebook, I think. Some folks are asking about that. I think that she's moved over, as you would say, to the dark side. Gary Haynes asking about a 2023 running back. Yeah, I don't know that it's obvious right now that Georgia's going to get a 2023 running back. Jeff talked about the possibility of a reclassification from the very good-looking running back that Georgia got for the class of 2024. That may be, I don't know how realistic that is or not, but Jeff at least mentioned that as a possibility. But clearly Georgia has a great commit for the class of 2024 at the running back spot out of the state of Maryland going back to last week. But in terms of the big names here for 2023, not quite so sure. Lucy Bowers-Boykin said before the haircut he looked exactly like Screech. Maybe so. Maybe so. Chad Williams says he also blames Saban for gas prices. There you go. Chad may be onto something there on that. Monty Moon says he wants to give Bama a rebuilding year 2.0. Boy, I love that. I love that. That's a good one, Monty. That could be fun to think about right there. That could be fun to think about. All right, yeah, we got to go. Sandy Price says the Kentucky thing's not good for the entire university. Greg Sankey's going to have to make some phone calls. Yeah, it feels like Sankey's making a lot of those phone calls as of late. There's been a little bit more public infighting, I think, during his tenure as SEC commissioner than ever happened. You know, Mike Sly, for the most part, put all of that to bed, and you had kind of a very harmonious, at least publicly, very harmonious persona for the SEC. That's not been quite as true during the Sankey era, and I'm sure the university probably does not love its two most high-profile coaches battling back and forth. But, you know, that's where I think you got to blame, you know, Calipari here a little bit because, listen, this is not a, you know, popular thing to say, but if Calipari is going to say, hey, everybody knows we're a basketball school, we should get whatever we want. Can you imagine a football coach doing that when they know deep down that the money they make as a program pays for everything else that happens on the campus athletically? The women's basketball team flies the NCAA tournament. That money was paid for by the work the football team did. Can you imagine if any football coach said, hey, we're a football school around here, everybody needs to fall in line? They don't do that even though they pay for everything. Sometimes it seems like paying for everything counts for nothing. But they pay for everything, and yet no football coach would ever say what Calipari decided to get into his ego about and say this past week. And that's why it's conduct so unbecoming. It's not because Kentucky isn't, majority thought of as a basketball school. That's the case. But even at Kentucky, the football team generates more revenue on a yearly basis than the basketball team does, and it spends a lot less. That's why I said before, Calipari is a little bit more of a leech on the system than maybe he realizes. But the point is that even at the schools where they are football schools and the football pays for everything, you still don't have the football coaches walking around saying, hey, we're a football school, you better give me what I want. But somehow Calipari feels empowered to do that from a basketball standpoint. It's just it's a huge misstep. It's a huge misstep, and Mark Stoops' right to be angry about it. Joseph Kennedy, very funny. All right, we got to go. Good stuff. Good comments. Thanks for being here for our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Y'all check out R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust R.S. Andrews and all that today. Get your air conditioning unit tuned back up. Just costs $99, and they'll keep you going and feeling cool for the rest of the summer that's still on its way. So find them online, rsandrews.com, and we will see you tomorrow here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Also, check out the AJC online, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC.com. The Atlanta Braves start a very big series today with the New York Mets. You can follow all of that online at AJC.com. And Falcons training camp after the Falcons' first, I guess they've officially broken camp, first preseason game in Detroit. Seems like it went better than not. So you can follow that online, AJC.com there as well. And we'll see you back here tomorrow, 9:45 for the first and 15, 10 a.m. after that on all the other video platforms. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll look forward to talking to you then.